No one knew where my resources came from. They only knew that the lifeline of survival for the entire wasteland lay in my hands. In the end, everyone bowed and submitted, and I became the wasteland's sole absolute ruler. Welcome to the show. The exciting story is about to begin. I can feel my body temperature dropping rapidly. The cold rubble of the ruins pressed into my back. Broken rebar and concrete stabbing into my flesh, bringing waves of numb, stabbing pain. The gray sky hung low. The once prosperous North American city completely fallen into a silent wasteland, its shattered walls and ruins stretching endlessly. Yellowed weeds crazily pushed through the cracks, and the wind carried rust, dust, and a faint metallic tang of blood. 3 months had passed since the apocalypse. Arrived no order, no rescue, no hope, only endless hunger and ceaseless slaughter. My name is Cole Sawyer. Before the cataclysm I was just an ordinary city maintenance worker, no power, no status, average skills. In this calamity of human collapse, I'm just one of the countless ants struggling to survive. My throat felt as if it had been sanded raw, and the wound in my abdomen burned fiercely. Warm blood soaked through my thin sweatshirt, sticking slimily to my skin. I spent my last strength crawling to hide behind the rubble of a collapsed office building, hoping to avoid the roaming looters and endure this brutal day. But in the end I was still noticed. Still breathing. Rough footsteps slowly drew closer. 3 elongated shadows were cast from the far end of the ruins, and combat boots crushed shards of glass on the ground with a grating crunch. The man at the head of them was burly, his face all jowls, a menacing tattoo wrapped around his neck. He held a sharpened rebar in his hand, one of the notorious marauders in the area. He stood over me and stepped on my injured hand, his eyes devoid of any humanity, only greed and indifference. Judging by these wounds, you must have just fought someone over supplies. Right. You're definitely hiding food and water on you. I gritted my teeth and reached up to struggle, but my weakened body wouldn't obey. For 3 days straight I'd survived on a few sips of moldy rainwater. My wounds had bled too much, and I was near unconsciousness. In the apocalypse, human life is worth the least, while a bite of food or a bottle of clean water is worth the most. The weak always end up plundered and erased, leaving behind not even a ripple. Another tall, skinny thug beside them sneered and kicked my ribs. Searing pain shot through me and my vision went black. Don't waste time, this area was emptied out long ago. If this kid's still alive, he's definitely got supplies. Find them. Then finish him off. One less body in the wasteland. One less person stealing food. The ringleader nodded, bent over and gripped the rebar in his hands. His eyes icy. Don't worry. One cut, and it's over. Give him a quick death. The rebar rose high, its cold reflection flashing across my eyes. At that moment, I felt no anger, only an absolute unwillingness to accept my fate. I had never hurt anyone on purpose. I lived cautiously, avoiding all conflict, just trying to survive. But fate never favors the weak. Was I really going to die here in ignominious defeat, rot away into nobody's concern, and be buried by wind and sand? Detected host vital signs nearing failure. Heart rate continuously plummeting. Meeting binding conditions. Infinite resource system formally activated. Newbie starter pack issued. Basic life repair potion 1. Pure water 5. Compressed high energy biscuits 3. Portable self-defense dagger 1. A cold, mechanical system prompt abruptly sounded in my mind. Crystal clear with not a hint of noise. I froze abruptly. My near death. Chaotic mind snapping instantly to clarity. A system. An apocalypse system. Before I could react, a pale blue translucent virtual panel materialized in front of my eyes. Visible only to me. The panel's interface was simple and clear. 6 large characters at the top read Infinite Resources System, and below, the inventory neatly displayed all the supplies just listed, tactile and lifelike, within reach, almost instinctively. I concentrated all my thoughts and silently recited, use basic life repair potion. The next second, a gentle warm current swept through my body, flowing along my veins into every limb and bone. The grisly wound in my abdomen stopped bleeding and began to close at a visibly rapid pace. The bone-chilling cold and tearing agony receded swiftly. My drained strength surged back, and my foggy mind cleared in an instant. In just 2 seconds, the near-death weakness completely vanished, and I regained strength throughout my body. The raised rebar thundered down at that moment, roaring through the air as it aimed straight for my skull. A cold light flashed in my eyes. I sidestepped with precision. The rebar slammed into the gravel on the ground, sending up a spray of fragments. Before the other party could react, I thought quickly and pulled a portable self-defense dagger from the system inventory. The cool metal hilt settled firmly into my palm. Dodged it. The lead marauder froze for a moment, clearly not expecting a dying wreck to be able to dodge. A brutal expression instantly surging across his face. You still dare to dodge? You're asking for death. He stepped forward, raised the rebar and slammed it down again with a brutal, rapid motion. Carrying the ferocity of years of fighting, 10 minutes ago me would have been absolutely dead for sure. But now, with my body fully repaired and at its peak, my reaction speed and physical strength have all returned to their best. I crouched low, used the ruined rubble terrain to slide sideways, perfectly avoiding the attack while closing in on his position. At close range I flexed my wrist, the dagger precisely slicing across his wrist. The sharp blade sliced through flesh in an instant. The veins in his wrist bulged and burst as he clenched the rebar, and the excruciating pain made him go limp. The heavy rebar clanged as it fell onto the rubble. "You dare lay a hand on me?" The man's face was full of disbelief, and murderous intent suddenly filled his eyes. I gave him no chance to retaliate. After 3 months of brutal beatings in the apocalypse, I already knew that mercy toward looters is cruelty toward myself. I stepped forward, the dagger pressed precisely against his throat. My grip steady and resolute. In wasteland survival, you either kill or get killed. Get lost. My voice was hoarse, but laced with a bone-deep chill. The 2 thugs beside him were completely stunned. The prey that had been on the brink of death suddenly struck back, and the enormous contrast made them hesitate to move forward, their hands gripping the clubs trembling slightly. The man in charge had the sharp blade pressed against his neck. He could clearly feel the cold intent to kill. His arrogant bravado evaporated halfway, and he snarled weakly. "You wait. We're Logan's people. If you dare touch us, every raider in the sector will come after you." Logan. I understood immediately. He was the most brutal raider leader in this ruined area, with dozens of vagrant thugs under his command who survived by looting others. His hands were stained with the blood of countless innocents. She was the nightmare of every weak person in this wasteland. In the past, hearing that name would have filled me with fear and I would have avoided it at all costs. But now, looking at the 3 people before me and then at the infinite resources system panel floating in front of me, only indifference remained in my heart. From now on, I will no longer be an ant to be slaughtered. I have infinite resources: food, water, medicine, weapons, building materials, everything most scarce in the wasteland. I can exchange them with one click. Inexhaustible and endlessly usable. I tightened my wrist slightly, pressing the dagger another half-inch. The contact of cold metal made him go rigid. "Mess with me again. Next time I won't leave you alive." The overwhelming pressure completely shattered his mental defenses. He trembled all over, hissing and frantically begging for forgiveness. I shoved him hard. He staggered back several steps and, with his 2 subordinates, rolled and scrambled away, turning to flee without daring to pause. Watching the 3 of them flee in panic, I slowly straightened and exhaled a long, foul breath. The wind swept across the ruins, lifting clouds of dust. The wasteland that once filled me with despair now looked completely different to me. I raised my hand and stared at the blue system panel before me, my fingertips gently touching the virtual interface. A confidence like never before igniting in my chest. Saved from despair, the system awakened. From today on, I, Cole Sawyer, will no longer merely survive in this scarred wasteland. I will personally tear open a path to life, gain a foothold, and take control of everything. After driving away those 3 of Logan's men, the ruins fell back into dead silence, with only the wind moaning through the broken walls. I looked down at the black dagger in my palm, the metallic texture cold and real, then raised my eyes to the blue system panel floating in my vision. The sense of steadiness in my heart growing stronger and stronger. The newly awakened restorative elixir healed my severe wounds and spared my life. But I knew clearly this was only the beginning. 3 months into the apocalypse, humanity had long been gnawed clean by hunger and fear. Those few people earlier were just low-level lackeys. Logan's main force was still roaming this district, with only a dagger. I wouldn't last long. I must stockpile supplies. I must have companions. Alone in the wasteland, I will never get far. I focused my thoughts and opened the system's exchange interface. The interface listed countless items available for exchange. Basic survival supplies could all be redeemed without restriction or limits on quantity. No point constraints, truly infinite supply. I wasn't greedy and didn't exchange for weapons. The most urgent issue right now was solving the survival problem. With a thought, 5 crates of purified water, 20 high-energy compressed biscuits, 2 packs of sterile emergency gauze, and 3 bottles of anti-inflammatory medicine appeared at my feet in an instant. Stacked neatly, the moment the supplies hit the ground, I genuinely felt the system's terrifying power. These items are worth a fortune in the wasteland, yet I could pull them out at will. I quickly stuffed supplies into the shoulder backpack on my back, shoved the excess into my coat pockets, then slowly moved along the collapsed commercial street ruins. I planned to clear an area about a kilometer around, first to find a safe temporary shelter, second to see if there were any surviving civilians. In the apocalypse, the weak always band together for warmth. Going it alone only gets you killed faster. After walking a few hundred meters, stifled gasps and the clanging of metal came from the back door of a collapsed supermarket ahead, mixed with a man's harsh shouts. I immediately lowered my profile, pressed against a concrete wall, held my breath, and watched quietly. Through gaps in the rubble I saw 2 looters wielding steel pipes, circling a man and a woman. The man looked to be in his early 20s, wearing a shabby camouflage jacket, his arms scraped, his posture upright. You could tell he had some training, and he was now holding tightly to protect the woman behind him. These are Jesse Toller and Lila McKenna. The woman's face was pale, blood at the corner of her mouth, a savage gash across her arm. The wound had inverted and was already slightly inflamed. She clenched an empty water bottle in her hand, her gaze stubborn though trapped in a desperate situation. There was not a trace of pleading in her demeanor. Don't pretend you can still fight, kid, the leader of the raiders sneered, brandishing a bloodied steel pipe. Hand over the water and food you're hiding, and I'll spare your lives. Otherwise both of you will be lying here today. Jesse gritted his teeth and tensed his body, every muscle coiled and ready to fight to the death. We don't have anything. It's been 3 days since we found supplies. You've got the wrong people, wrong person. Another raider stepped forward and kicked Jesse in the knee, sending him crashing to his knees. It's just the 2 of you alive in this area. How have you survived without supplies? Hand them over. Or don't force us to act. A metal pipe was raised high, about to smash down hard on Jesse's skull. Layla lunged forward to push the raider away, but she was thrown aside, landing heavily on the gravel. Her wound tore open again, and she groaned in pain. Seeing this, I no longer stood by, having faced the despair of near death. I can't tolerate bullies picking on the weak. Besides, Jesse's build and fighting stance clearly showed professional military training, and Layla moved with steady, calm eyes, most likely a professional too. Saving them was an absolutely safe bet. I lifted my hand and took out the dagger the system had exchanged for me. My steps light and swift as I used the rubble as cover to close in. The 2 looters were focused entirely on the 2 people fallen on the ground. Completely unaware of the movement behind them, I hurried forward, raised my hand and precisely struck the looter in the rear on the back of the neck. The force perfectly controlled, so he immediately went limp and collapsed. The looter in front sensed something was wrong and spun around, face full of shock. Who are you? I said nothing, stepped forward, grabbed the wrist with which he was holding the metal pipe, and twisted it hard using his momentum. A sharp sound of bone cracking rang out, followed by the looter's piercing scream as the pipe clattered to the ground. I pressed him against the rubble wall, the dagger at his throat, the chill searing to the bone. Get out. One word, carrying an aura of ruthless decisiveness. This guy was nowhere near as arrogant as the others just now. Feeling the cold blade at his neck and seeing his fallen, unconscious companion, he was instantly terrified, scrambling to his feet and fleeing headlong without looking back, disappearing into the depths of the ruins. The crisis was over in an instant. Jesse pushed himself up with difficulty, watching me warily, his body still shielding Layla. His eyes were full of caution, not relaxed in the slightest. Who are you? Why did you help us? I sheathed my dagger, slowly straightened up, and said evenly, just passing by. I couldn't stand it. Layla slowly rose, raised a hand to press the wound that was bleeding, and studied me with a serious gaze. She was highly observant and noticed I showed none of the disheveled hunger of a typical survivor. My condition was far better. Do you have supplies on you? She asked softly. Her voice was weak but unusually calm. I didn't hide anything. I opened my backpack, took out 2 bottles of purified water and 4 compressed biscuits, and handed them over. Then produced sterile gauze and antiseptic. First hydrate. Eat something. Treat the wounds. Looking at the supplies handed over, Jesse and Layla's pupils instantly constricted. In the current wasteland, a single bottle of clean water is worth fighting for, and a ration of compressed biscuits is an even rarer commodity. For me to produce so much at once could drive countless survivors mad. The guarded look in Jesse's eyes immediately faded significantly, replaced by shock and disbelief. You, how do you have so many supplies? The whole district's supplies have long since been scavenged clean, I said lightly, offering no explanation of the system, only a vague answer. I have my own channels. Lila didn't press for the source. In an apocalypse, everyone has their secrets. She took the supplies, sipped 2 small mouthfuls of water to relieve her dry throat, then deftly cleaned and dressed her wounds. Professional, skillful movements that marked her as a medical worker. Jesse wolfed down the compressed biscuits, then, after replenishing his strength, bowed solemnly to me. Thank you for saving us. I'm Jesse, a discharged soldier. She is Lila. She used to be an ER nurse. We've been surviving together since the end of the world began, and we've almost run out of food for 3 days. I nodded. Cole, after a brief self-introduction. The atmosphere eased. Layla finished dressing the wound, looked up at me seriously. Cole, this area is all Logan's people now. Going solo is too dangerous. We know the terrain, can fight and rescue. If you don't mind, we want to follow you. Jesse immediately chimed in, eyes resolute. I can fight, hold positions, and won't be a drag, as long as you keep us alive. My life is yours. I looked at the 2 of them. Jesse's combat ability was reliable and his loyalty straightforward. Layla was meticulous and skilled in medicine, just what filled all my current gaps. These were the first companions I recruited in the apocalypse, and the founding cornerstone of my base. I gave a slight nod and replied, You can follow me. From now on, whatever I have to eat will be yours. As long as you're loyal, I can make you survive well in this wasteland, never have to endure hunger or flee again. Relief, like survivors after a disaster, instantly lit up their faces, and their eyes were full of resolve and loyalty. The sunset filtered through the gaps in the ruins and fell on the 3 of us. I looked at the two reliable companions at my side, then at the system panel of infinite resources before me, and felt utterly certain. My wasteland faction officially gets underway from this moment. After taking in Jesse and Lyra, the three of us temporarily hid in the second floor of a half-collapsed street-facing shop. The walls were relatively intact, the windows covered with torn metal sheets, offering excellent concealment, the most secure temporary refuge at this stage. I took out supplies redeemed from the system and let the two of them fully replenish their strength and heal their external wounds. Lyra, drawing on her professional medical experience, carefully examined all of our physical conditions, neatly stowed the remaining medicines, and methodically set up a makeshift medical corner. Jesse, maintaining the vigilance of a former soldier, stayed at the window keeping watch the whole time, not daring to relax for an instant. In just half a day together, I became increasingly certain that taking these two in was the right choice. One as the combat pillar, the other as the medical corps, each playing their part, meant my solitary path to survival was no longer passive. But the calm was destined to be only temporary. At dusk, the western sky was stained a dark, somber red, and the wasteland wind blew a bone-chilling cold through the window. Jesse suddenly crouched down, his voice taut and filled with vigilance. "Cole, something's wrong. There are footsteps downstairs. Quite a few of them. And they're marching in step, not scattered survivors." I immediately got up and moved closer to the window, peering down through a gap in the corrugated metal. On the ruined street below, 12 figures marched in formation. Each person carried a weapon: steel pipes, fire axes, improvised machetes, their gear, uniform, and movements coordinated, exuding a violent, bandit-like brutality. The man at the front was large and burly, his face fierce, a menacing scar cutting across his cheekbone, his eyes cold and ferocious. I recognized him at a glance, the leader of the three thugs I scared off during the day. Logan Hayes. Obviously, the three henchmen who ran back had tattled to him. "The place is found. It's this building." The thug I'd subdued earlier stood at the back of the group, pointing at the second-floor window with venom in his voice. "Boss, it's that kid alone, with plenty of clean water and food, and he even wounded the three of us." Logan glanced over the ruined second-floor structure, a cruel sneer tugging at his lips, his gaze so greedy it hardly tried to hide itself. "This part of town has been picked clean for 3 months. Anyone with surplus supplies must be hiding a big stash on them. Looks like we're in luck today." His deputy grinned and echoed, "Boss, he must have found a hidden supply depot. Kill them. Take everything. It's all ours." Logan raised a hand to quiet the crowd, then shouted up to the second floor in a rough, domineering voice that carried down the ruined street. "Listen up, people upstairs. I'm Logan. The sensible ones will hand over all the supplies immediately and come down to surrender. I'll spare your lives. If you fight to the bitter end, when we storm in, the men will be hacked to death and the women dragged back as collateral. An outright threat." Brazen to the extreme, Jesse clenched the dagger in his hand in an instant, his body taut, radiating combat intent. "Cole, they outnumber us. And they're all seasoned fighters who've been at this for years. If we go toe-to-toe, we'll lose out. How about we retreat through the back door ruins tunnel?" Lila also looked grave and said softly, "They outnumber us 4-1, and they have heavy cold weapons, without firearms. Facing them heat-in is too risky." I watched the arrogant band of looters downstairs, feeling not the slightest panic, only a cold indifference. Run. From the moment I awakened the system, the word run ceased to exist. Before, I had no subordinates and poor equipment. Yet I could still easily counter-kill small-time lackeys. Now I have helpers and unlimited resources, so there's no need to cower. I said calmly, "No need to run. You can dodge once, but you can't dodge forever. Someone as insatiable as Logan, once he targets us, will pester us without end. Today just happens to be a chance to eliminate the risk in one go." As the words fell, I moved my mind and opened the system's exchange interface. There was no need to exchange firearms at this stage. Too much noise could attract unknown danger. I directly exchanged for 3 high-hardness alloy tactical knives, 2 tempered steel anti-explosion batons, and 3 pairs of cut-resistant forearm guards, all appearing silently on the ground. "Arm yourselves. Unknown containment, no need to force it. Just hold them." I ordered the 2. Jesse's eyes lit up. He immediately stepped forward, grabbed the gear, quickly donned it neatly. The tactical bearing of a veteran instantly came through. "Received. Leave it to me." Layla also quickly picked up a dagger and arm guards. Although she was a medic, 3 years of surviving the apocalypse had made her combat ability far beyond ordinary. Calm and steady now, she was ready for battle. Downstairs, Logan, seeing no movement upstairs for a long time, had his patience completely exhausted. His face darkened instantly. "Charge. Tear this building apart. Drag them out. Supplies and people, don't let any of them go." 12 raiders roared as they rushed in. Some scrambled up the rubble-strewn walls. Others battered at the stairwell's metal door, brutal and frenzied, carrying the ferocious air of long years of pillage. Quickly, the metal door was smashed open. The first 4 raiders barreled up the stairwell with machetes raised, bristling with murderous intent. I met them first, holding a riot baton. firmly holding the stairwell entrance. The narrow stairwell prevented multiple attackers from flanking me, perfectly negating their numerical advantage. The first big man to charge swung his blade in a savage chop with brutal force. I sidestepped easily, the baton sweeping precisely across and smashing hard into his knee joint. Crack! A crisp snap of bone rang out, accompanied by a piercing scream. The burly man collapsed to his knees, completely losing the will to fight. The three who followed lunged at the same time. Jesse immediately stepped forward to assist, using professional fighting techniques to entangle two of them, every move fierce and unrelenting. Lyra fell back to the side, precisely evading attacks while waiting for an opportunity to sneak in and restrain, her actions clean and decisive. In less than a minute, all four attackers who had rushed in were down, their wails rising one after another. Downstairs, Logan's face changed dramatically. Clearly hadn't expected us to be so formidable. The victory he had been so sure of was shattered in an instant. Trash. A bunch of loafers, Logan cursed, personally hoisting the heavy fire axe and, with the remaining 8, charged up the building. All of you, go. I want to see how long they can hold out. A strong aura of killing descended. A new round of fierce assault began, and the blood battle in the wasteland corridor officially erupted. I gripped the riot baton tightly, my gaze cold, facing the swarming marauders hidden. This was my first direct team fight since awakening the system, and also my first battle to establish myself in the wasteland. I did not seek quick kills, only to utterly subdue these people, to make every raider in this area remember my name, and remember the price of provoking me. The hallway thick with smoke of gunpowder, the sounds of fighting, clashing weapons, and screams interwove. The temporary stronghold that had been peaceful was completely reduced to a battlefield. The melee in the corridor had entered a white-hot phase. Logan personally led the charge. His heavy fire axe struck the concrete wall, blasting out chunks of rubble with destructive force far beyond that of an ordinary raider. The remaining 8 thugs pushed forward in a tight group, their coordination smooth, clearly tactics honed by long-term pillaging, much tougher to deal with than the rabble from before. Jesse clung tightly to 2 close combat thugs. The veteran's fighting skills were clean and efficient, while avoiding the machete's cutting edges. He used a riot baton to strike his opponent's joints with precision, each hit depriving them of mobility, but the attackers had the numbers advantage. The others bypassed Jesse and split their roles. Some kept him occupied while others rushed toward Layla, who was responsible for controlling the flank, attempting to break through the weak point first. Although Layla was skilled in brawling, she wasn't good at standing firm against multiple attackers hidden. After dodging several times, an old injury on her arm was carved open by a machete, and blood instantly soaked the bandaged gauze. Pain made her brow knot, and her movements faltered for a moment. One thug who spotted an opening sneered, raised a steel pipe and smashed it hard into her back with brutal force. If it landed solidly, at best it would fracture bones, at worst render her unconscious. My eyes went cold. I no longer held back. Earlier I had deliberately restrained my strength, only wanting to drive the enemies back and secure the position. But these desperate men didn't understand moderation. They only took advantage. Against wasteland scoundrels, only absolute violence can thoroughly intimidate them. With a rapid thought, the system panel popped up, instantly redeeming 2 high-lethality military daggers, which I gripped in my palms. The cold metallic edges flashed into being, sidestepping the incoming firefighter's axe. I suddenly accelerated, staying low and lunging forward, precisely circling to the side of the thug who had ambushed Layla. With a crisp short stab I neatly sliced, accurately flicking the steel pipe from his hand, while my elbows slammed into his chest. A dull thud rang out. The thug let out a muffled groan and was sent flying, crashing heavily into the stairwell wall and collapsing to the floor, completely unable to continue fighting. Layla, fall back and recover, I said in a low voice. Layla immediately understood, gritting her teeth as she stepped out of the fight and pressed against the wall edge, quickly applying pressure to stop the bleeding, though her eyes remained fixed on the battlefield, ready to support at any moment. Logan's axe missed, watching his men fall one after another. The arrogance on his face was completely replaced by a feral sneer. The scar looked especially terrifying in the dim light. Some skill. No wonder you were able to put my men down, 2 bit in this wasteland, without enough strength. It's ultimately a dead end. He roared and charged again. The fireman's axe sliced through the air with a whoosh, a wide, brutal sweep, big, forceful, and domineering. I planted my feet firmly, crossing my daggers to block. The hard military short blades met the axe edge solidly. The huge impact made the gravel on the ground tremble slightly. Before Logan could recover and strike back, I used his momentum, spun, and drove a precise kick into his lower abdomen. Logan outweighed ordinary men by a lot, yet he was still shoved back 3 steps by my kick. His breathing became instantly chaotic. The web of his hand went numb, and his grip on the fireman's axe weakened by more than half. Jesse took the opportunity to deal with the opponent in front of him, quickly fell back to defend, and tightly blocked the stairwell gap, eliminating any chance of the remaining enemies encircling them. The tide of battle had completely turned. I pressed forward step by step, My twin daggers equally suited for offense and defense. Every strike hit the opponent's flaw with precision. The peak physique after the system modifications let my speed, strength, and reflexes overwhelm these ordinary raiders on all fronts. Their brute force and fighting techniques, which they relied on to run rampant, were powerless in the face of absolute strength. In just 2 minutes, the remaining thugs fell one after another. Cries of agony filled the entire stairwell, and no one dared take another step forward. The entire second-floor battlefield had only Logan standing. He looked at his men collapsed on the ground, howling in pain, and at my approaching figure step by step. Fear finally surfaced in his eyes. He had roamed this wasteland for months, looting supplies and wiping out squads, and had never encountered such a formidable survivor. I in front of him did not look like an ordinary person struggling to survive, but more like a battle-hardened top-tier warrior. What exactly are you? Logan's voice trembled, his hand gripping the fire axe quivering slightly. There shouldn't be an expert like you in this district. I didn't answer his empty words. I slowly raised my hand, the tip of the stiletto aimed at his throat. You brought people to steal my supplies, to ambush and kill my men. Now, it's time to pay your debt. Logan panicked completely, instantly abandoning all his arrogance, hurriedly throwing away the fire axe in his hand and raising his hands to beg for mercy. Brother, I was wrong. I offended you because I was blind. I'll give you all my supplies. I still have plenty of stock. I'll hand it all over. Please spare my life. On the wasteland, begging for mercy is the last card of the week and the cheapest lie. I know this kind of person's nature too well. Surviving by luck only brings even harsher revenge. My tone was icy. When you were making threats back then, you didn't think about leaving us any way to live. As soon as the words fell, I stepped forward, pressing the dagger to his throat. Intense fear completely shattered Logan's psychological defenses. His face went ashen. He backed away repeatedly, finally clumsily falling into a pile of rubble and scrambling down the stairs as he fled. I deliberately did not pursue. What I wanted was not to slaughter them all, but to make an example. Let him flee alive so he can spread word of today's crushing defeat throughout the surrounding wasteland. So every faction that covets my supplies knows clearly. Anything of mine, touch it and you die. Offend me and you'll be mutilated. Logan scrambled out of the stairwell, looking at the wounded strewn on the ground, daring not to pause for a moment, and used all his strength to vanish into the end of the ruins. With that, the raid was completely over. I looked down at the looters writhing on the ground, feeling no pity, and raised my hand to issue a cold command. Disable their combat capabilities and drive them all out of this area. Jesse immediately carried out the order, acting decisively and thoroughly, eliminating any possibility of these people causing trouble again. After this battle, the three of us firmly secured the temporary stronghold in these ruins. My formidable combat prowess was deeply imprinted in Jesse and Layla's minds. When they looked at me, their gazes held not only admiration but an absolute conviction and loyalty. Layla finished dressing the new wound, stepped forward and said earnestly, Cole, Logan is narrow-minded and vindictive. After such a crushing defeat, he absolutely won't let it go. He'll definitely gather more people to come back for revenge. We must build a solid stronghold as soon as possible. We can't stay in these makeshift camps any longer. I nodded slightly, exactly what I had been thinking. Scattered skirmishes and occasional victories mean nothing. To survive long-term in the wasteland, to protect those around you and fend off the endless waves of danger, the only way is to establish a secure base of your own. The sun finally set. Night blanketed the whole wasteland. The evening wind was bleak, but it couldn't shake the certainty deep in my heart. The first battle was a triumph, sending a warning to the petty brigands. The wasteland order that belongs to me will soon begin from zero and be built up step by step. After clearing the remaining traces of raiders around the stronghold through the night, I set out with Jesse and Layla to scout on foot along the western ruins of the city, searching for a site suitable for a permanent base. The street-facing shop we inspected earlier had thin walls and too many entrances, making it worthless for long-term occupation. Logan could return at any time. We needed a place that was easy to defend, hard to assault, and spacious enough. After walking roughly 2 kilometers, an abandoned gated community came into view. It had once been an upscale suburban complex, surrounded by a 3-meter-high concrete wall, with a reinforced steel gate. The buildings were neatly arranged inside, and the underground parking garage, independent water pipelines, and contiguous lawns were all intact. It was a rare, excellent location in the wasteland. Jesse circled the wall and came back, excited. Cole, this place is perfect. The wall hasn't largely collapsed, just a few cracks to patch. Once the gate is reinforced, outsiders won't be able to break in easily, and the underground garage can serve as storage and a refuge. Layla crouched down to inspect the exposed water pipe connection, pinching the damp soil between her fingers. The buried water supply pipes are intact. If we only replace the damaged fittings, we can connect to a clean water source and won't need to rely long-term on bottled water exchange from the system, which will save a lot of storage space for supplies. Their assessments matched mine exactly. I decided immediately. This would be our future secure base. I stood in the center of the community gate and opened the floating blue system panel, switching to the building materials exchange section: cement, rebar, thickened steel plates, waterproofing membranes, brand new metal doors and windows, reinforcement rivets, repair fittings. Various infrastructure materials could all be exchanged with no limits. At the thought, a large pile of building materials neatly appeared inside the perimeter wall, stacked nearly 2 meters high, enough to complete defensive renovations for the whole community. Jesse stared in disbelief, reaching out to touch the cold new steel plate, his voice full of shock. So many brand new materials outside. Just one steel plate could be exchanged for 10 bottles of potable water. How on earth are you continually pulling these things out? Layla was already used to my endless stream of supplies. She simply stood quietly to one side, organizing a basic medical kit, asking no further questions. She understood that everyone has untellable cards, and prying too much would only damage mutual trust. I didn't explain the system in detail, only replying simply, "Don't worry about the source. You only need to handle construction planning. I'll supply all materials without limit." The three of them immediately divided the work and got to it. Jesse, drawing on his engineering training from the military, took charge of repairing cracks in the wall, welding reinforcements on the gate, and building an outer security fence. Layla organized the interior rooms of the base, planning out the medical area, living quarters, and storage zones while repairing the water supply pipes and clearing rotten debris from the building. I handled continuous exchanges for building materials while moving heavy steel and repairing weak points in the walls. The materials exchanged by the system were uniformly weighted and hard in texture, far superior to the rusted scrap commonly found in the wasteland, greatly improving construction efficiency. Working late into the night, all the damaged gaps in the outer wall were sealed, the steel gate fitted with double-layer steel plate latches, and the top of the wall studded with anti-climb metal spicasso. Even if dozens attacked at once, they wouldn't be able to breach the defenses in a short time. Renovations inside the base progressed in parallel. 2 ground floor units were opened up and merged to carve out an independent medical area. I exchanged in bulk for sterile beds, disinfection equipment, and various oral medications for external injuries, filling the entire room. The north side buildings were all organized into living quarters, exchanging for mattresses, bedding, and warm clothing, finally leaving behind nights spent curled up on rubble. The underground garage was divided into a giant storage warehouse, where heaps of compressed food, bottled purified water, canned goods, and seasonings were continually exchanged and stacked, reserves enough to support dozens of people comfortably for years. By the time the sky paled, the community renovation was basically complete. We sat on a clean lawn bench to rest briefly. Layla turned on the repaired tap and clear, impurity-free running water gushed out. It was the first time in 3 months since the end began that we didn't have to conserve scarce bottled water. Jesse gulped down the water and looked at the sturdy walls and orderly houses around us, his eyes a little moved. I never dreamed, even in my sleep, that in the end times we could have a place this safe, not having to hide every day, not having to fight for a single bite of food. I looked out at the distant, gray-tinged ruined city. I knew clearly that the current base was only a basic framework. The fortifications still lacked long-range suppression capabilities, and the three of us were not enough to withstand a large-scale enemy siege. Layla keenly noticed my concern and softly analyzed the situation. Logan will definitely hold a grudge after this crushing defeat. He won't come alone. It's very likely he'll seek out other looting forces to team up. Once they figure out the scale of our base, a large-scale assault is only a matter of time. Right now we only have cold weapons, so we're completely at a disadvantage in long-range confrontation. Her words struck right at my thoughts. If we wanted to hold this base, armed forces were an indispensable element. I raised my hand and pulled up the system's armament exchange menu. My eyes scanned the vast array of firearms, ammunition, bulletproof armor, and tactical gear, and a complete plan had already formed in my mind. Starting tomorrow, we'll build an exclusive guard unit armory, exchange firearms and protective gear in bulk, and systematically train combat tactics. Only with sufficiently powerful arms can this base truly shelter everyone. No longer fearing any raiders' incursions, the morning breeze swept over the trimmed lawn. The spikes on the wall flashed a cold gleam in the dawn light. A secure refuge had already taken shape, but this was only the first step in my control of the wasteland. Stockpiling arms and forming an armed force would be the most critical tasks to come. After dawn, I led Jesse into the deepest and used bay of the underground garage. The space was sealed with a single entry point. With a little modification, it could become a dedicated armory without worrying about accidental discharge harming the living quarters. I planted my feet, summoned the system's weapons exchange interface with a thought, and dense lists of guns, ammunition, and protective gear filled the virtual panel. No exchange limits. Take as much as you want. Jessie stood at my side, her breathing unconsciously hushed, eyes full of disbelief. In the apocalypse, a single intact pistol could trigger a fight among a dozen people, and bullets were fought over one by one. Yet I could now casually exchange for entire batches of standard-issue weapons. Such a resource stockpile across the wasteland was simply unimaginable. First get the basic combat gear ready, I murmured, then concentrated to issue the exchange command. 3 crates of assault rifles. 10 crates of rifle ammunition. 5 pistols. 3 crates of 9mm rounds. 20 sets of reinforced body armor. Tactical helmets. Knee and elbow pads. Tactical pouches. And tactical knives neatly settled onto the floor. The metal collisions made a heavy, orderly clatter. The brand new firearms gleamed with a cold matte finish, without a trace of rust. Jesse hurried forward, picked up an assault rifle and checked the magazine and barrel with practiced precise movements, the instincts of a veteran ingrained in his bones. He cocked the bolt to confirm the weapon's condition, ran his fingertips along the gun, and said in awe, all standard issue, brand new. Plenty of ammo. Just this cache of weapons could crush every marauding squad around here. I didn't stop the exchanges and continued bringing out more supplies. 2 long-range sniper rifles with high magnification scopes. Thousands of rounds of specialized sniper ammunition. Dozens of concussion grenades. Smoke grenades. Military first aid kits. And reinforced ballistic shields all piled along both sides of the compartment. And the armory was instantly filled with assorted equipment. After finishing the base water supply inspection, Layla followed the sounds into the underground garage. She froze for a moment at the sight of weapons and ammo scattered across the floor, then quickly regained her composure and began assigning areas. Left side for long guns and ammunition. Right side for armor and throwable items. I'll set the military first aid kits apart so they can be accessed quickly in wartime to avoid confusion. The 3 of us divided the work and spent 2 hours organizing the armory. Each category of supplies was placed in its own area with simple LS, making retrieval orderly and clear. When we finished, we went to the open lawn inside the base wall, a wide, unobstructed area suitable for shooting and tactical training. Jesse took on the instructor role. He had received systematic tactical training in the military and taught step-by-step gun stance, basic shooting, movement and evasion, and squad coordination. I rely on system enhancements. My stamina and reactions far exceed ordinary people, so with a little practice I could accurately hit distant targets among the ruins. Although Layla is a medic, she earnestly learned basic shooting and close-quarter self-defense tactics. Understanding that on the battlefield you must protect yourself before you can help the wounded. After 2 consecutive days of uninterrupted training, the 3 of us grew increasingly in sync in our cooperative combat. Jesse excels at frontal assaults. Long-range suppression was my responsibility. Layla moved along the flanks handling support, first aid, and ambushes. A complete 3-person squad tactic had taken shape. During a training break, Layla leaned against the wall cleaning her pistol. Worry in her expression. Our armament is complete now, but there are only 3 of us. If we encounter a large force of dozens attacking, the defenses could easily develop weak points. There are also many lone survivors nearby, mostly unarmed and suffering from plunderers' bullying. If they're willing to join us, we could both increase manpower and strengthen the base's defenses. I approved of her idea. With unlimited resources, supporting more people is no problem at all, except in kind. Vulnerable survivors would both increase the base's manpower and fulfill my original intention of protecting the weak. Jesse also nodded in agreement and suggested going out to search for scattered survivors, screening for those willing to live peacefully and without bad records to bring back to the base. While we were planning the search mission, urgent shouting came from the makeshift watchtower atop the wall. It was the drifting boy we sheltered yesterday. He stood high up and shouted down. Big Brother Cole, I see a large group moving in the ruins in the distance. At least 30 or 40 people. The leader has a scar on his face, and there's a stranger in a suit beside him. I immediately climbed the watchtower and raised the high-powered binoculars we redeemed from the system to look into the distance. In the view, Logan was walking at the head of the group. The scar on his face was clearly visible. Beside him stood a neatly dressed man in a casual suit, with a somewhat effeminate bearing, none other than Karen Brooks, the leader of the large survivor camp. Logan kept gesturing at Karen and continuously pointing toward our base, spitting as he spoke. He was clearly recounting the prior defeat and inciting them to send troops to wipe us out. Jesse tightened his assault rifle at his waist, his face darkening. Logan actually sided with Karen. Karen has over 30 armed drifters under his command, and the camp hoards a small amount of old firearms. They're the strongest force in this area. 2 groups of bad men joining forces. This is going to be trouble. Layla quickly returned to the underground armory, took inventory of ammunition and medical supplies, and prepared the pre-battle stockpile. I stood on the watchtower, watching the Allied forces slowly halt among the distant ruins. There was no panic in my heart, only a growing sense of battle readiness. The squad that had just finished gearing up was perfect for testing our equipment and training results. With unlimited ammo, complete defensive works, and a 3-person team working in tacit coordination, even if 40 enemy troops attacked together, we were fully confident we could hold the base. I turned and descended from the watchtower, issuing orders to the 2 of them in a low voice. Various firearms and bulletproof gear were distributed. Guard positions along the walls were all set, and a large-scale bloody battle was quietly brewing not far away. Standing on the watchtower, I held a high-powered telescope and could see the distant troops clearly. Logan clung to Karen like a tail wagging, begging dog, never leaving her side. Gesticulating toward the walls of our community base and jabbering on his expression full of exaggerated accusations. Karen had one hand in her suit pocket, standing composed, calculation hidden in her eyes. She occasionally raised a hand to interrupt Logan and leisurely scanned our intact walls and orderly buildings, greed almost written on her face. Jesse leaned against the lookout railing, his fingertips repeatedly rubbing the assault rifle's grip, his tone grave. Karen used to be middle management in a pre-disaster real estate conglomerate. She's far more cunning than a brute like Logan. She holds the abandoned East Side Mall, has gathered over 40 refugees, scavenges nearby survivor stockpiles, and still has 5 old hunting rifles. She's the toughest force in the whole West Sector. With Logan coming here wounded this time, he's definitely using our base's rich supplies as a token of allegiance. Layla climbed the lookout quickly carrying the medical kit. She had just finished inventorying all the first aid consumables and checked the defensive points along the wall. A thin film of dust on her temple. I walked the perimeter. All the spikes and reinforced plates are intact. The 4 firing embrasures are all ready. And the ammo in the underground garage is enough to sustain a long stalemate. But the 2 enemy factions have combined, nearing 50 people. A prolonged defense would drain a lot of our energy. I put down the binoculars and sorted the situation out clearly in my mind. Logan is resentful over the last defeat and bent on revenge. Karen covets our steady stream of supplies. The 2 of them, each with their own agenda, have joined forces with the single aim of destroying the base and stealing all survival resources. They're still standing among the distant ruins instead of launching an immediate assault. Which clearly means Karen is calculating an attack plan and won't recklessly charge the walls. They won't storm the gate directly. Karen is good at flanking and scheming. She'll most likely split her forces to look for weak points in the wall while sending people to call for surrender and unsettle us. I spoke my assessment and then assigned defensive tasks. Jesse holds the 2 eastern wall embrasures, responsible for suppressing frontal charges. Layla mans the west side, prioritizing targets carrying firearms to prevent long-range sneak attacks. I'll take the high ground at the main gate to support both flanks at any time. The 2 of them immediately nodded and took the orders, splitting up to run to their defensive positions, while distributing the bulletproof shields, spare firearms, and grenades to every embrasure. I thought for a moment, reopened the system exchange interface, and replenished 2,000 rifle rounds, 20 concussion grenades, and 10 reinforced bulletproof shields, stacking them all in the inner corridor along the wall to ensure wartime supplies would not be interrupted. Not half an hour later, Kyron walked out of the ranks alone, slowly making his way to the open ground 200 meters from the wall, spreading his hands in a harmless gesture and raising his voice to shout at us. His tone was steady but full of enticement. Friends inside the wall, I'm Kyron. I know you've stockpiled massive amounts of food, clean water, and munitions. The 3 of you simply can't hold such a large territory. Why not open the gate, turn over half your supplies, and submit to me? I'll allow you to stay in the base, allocate separate rooms, and you won't have to live every day on edge defending against raiders. If you insist on resisting, my men will make repeated assaults on the wall. And in the end everyone will die in the chaos while the supplies still end up mine. Logan craned his head from the crowd behind and shouted along at the top of his lungs. Cole, be sensible and surrender. Last time we let you get away by luck. This time 50 of us are working together, you stand no chance. Hand over the supplies obediently, and I might spare your life. I stood on the high ground, watching the 2 of them sing in chorus with cold eyes, my heart utterly unmoved. Karen seemed to offer a way out, but in truth only wanted to absorb the base without cost. Once the gates opened in submission, the 3 of us would only end up stripped of all supplies and left as corpses in the ruins, in the wasteland. An ambitious man's promises aren't worth half a grain of trust. I couldn't be bothered to waste words with him, so I raised my hand and pulled the trigger. A shot hit the pile of rubble at Karen's feet, the spray of dust instantly soaking his neatly pressed suit trousers. The sudden gunfire made Karen take 2 instinctive steps back. The composed mask on his face finally cracked, and cruelty replaced the earlier calm. It seems you've chosen the most foolish path, Karen said low, dropping a vicious line before turning and briskly retreating back into the ranks. The crowd in the distance immediately began to move, splitting into 3 teams according to the formation Karen had planned in advance. One team, led by Logan, made the main assault on the front gate. The other 2 circled to the south and north sides of the wall, searching for low sections they could climb over. Old hunting rifles were distributed to several elite thugs, their muzzles all aimed at the crenellations of our wall. Jesse shouted from the east wall. They're splitting up to encircle us, with plenty of men on the north and south sides, and some of them have shotguns. Layla immediately adjusted her position, crouched at the embrasure on the west side, set up her sniper rifle, and aimed at the distant armed enemies, always ready to eliminate the long-range threat first. I tightened my grip on the assault rifle and swept my gaze over the enemy forces closing in from 3 directions. I knew deep down that the real bloody battle was about to begin. Karen's carefully planned encirclement attack seemed unstoppable, but he would never know that I have a system of unlimited supplies, ammo, and materials inside this wall are inexhaustible. And their numbers alone could never break through my defenses. The wind rustled the metal spikes atop the wall with a faint humming. The chaotic footsteps in the rubble grew clearer in the distance as dense figures kept advancing toward the wall. The desperate defense that would decide the base's survival officially began, after Karen returned to the squad. The figures among the ruins split and moved quickly. 50 armed refugees were divided into 3 teams with clear roles and attack plan that had clearly been rehearsed. Logan led more than 20 men carrying steel pipes and wooden ladders straight for the main gate. The other 2 groups of a dozen or so each circled to the south and north ends of the perimeter wall, searching for low sections. The 5 old hunting rifles were all handed to the gunmen Karen had carefully selected, who spread out at the rear of the group, using broken walls for cover and waiting for a chance to fire at the crenellations of the wall. I stood on the high ground above the main gate, sweeping a binocular across every enemy movement, calmly replaying the situation in my mind. They outnumbered us by an order of magnitude and had ranged weapons to pin us down, but their biggest weaknesses were outdated equipment and scarce ammunition. Each of those 5 hunting rifles had only a few rounds. Once they ran out, they would completely lose their range suppression. Behind me was the infinite resource system as a safety net. Ammo, explosives, and protective supplies could be replenished at any time. That was our crushing advantage. I immediately shouted to both sides of the wall, relaying the combat plan. Jesse, watch the ladder team on the east side prioritize stopping them from setting up and climbing the ladder. You don't need to kill them, just suppress their advanced speed. Layla, watch the enemies in the rear with the hunting rifles. Their ammo is limited. Neutralize the ranged threat early to reduce our exposure to fire. I'll hold the main gate. If either flank gets pressured, call out immediately and I'll bring stun grenades to support. Jesse answered at once, raising his assault rifle to aim at Logan's charging squad. A ballistic shield braced in front of the crenellation to block flying debris. Layla moved to the highest Merlin on the west side, set up a scoped sniper rifle, and locked her sight on the 5 enemies clutching hunting rifles in the distance, her fingertip resting lightly on the trigger, ready to fire at any moment. It wasn't long before Logan's team reached the base of the main gate wall first. Several heavy wooden ladders were thrown against the wall edge. A few desperados climbed them, snarling obscenities in an attempt to break our psychological defenses with sheer intimidation. Logan stood at the front of the group, swinging the firefighting axe from before and hacking at the wall's steel plates with wild blows. The clangs rang painfully loud across the wasteland. Rush them all. Take the base, help yourselves to the food and clean water inside. And there's weapons and armor for everyone. Logan howled madly, pushing his men to charge. I didn't hesitate for a second. I squeezed the trigger of my assault rifle. The bullets struck the ladder rungs with precision, and the wooden ladder snapped instantly. 2 of the thugs who were climbing the middle lost their support and fell straight from the 3-meter wall, slamming onto the rubble below. The brittle crack of breaking bones was audible even through the wall, and their screams rose and fell in succession. The remaining thugs, seeing this, dared not climb the ladders and instead took cover behind the broken wall, swinging steel pipes and hurling stones at the wall to try to obscure our line of fire. At that moment, shotgun blasts rang out simultaneously from the north and south, buckshot striking the steel plate stack in front of me with heavy thuds that left shallow dents on the surface. Fortunately, my reinforced armor completely absorbed the damage. Layla seized the pause while the opponent reloaded after firing, calmly squeezed the sniper rifle's trigger, and a gunman holding a shotgun in the distance dropped to the ground with a thud, a large burst of blood blooming on his chest. The remaining 4 armed enemies instantly panicked, hurriedly switching cover and no longer daring to expose themselves to shoot. Karen stood on a high point of the ruined area in the rear, watching his men fall one after another. The composed disguise on his face was completely torn away, his eyes full of grim fury. He had been confident he could easily breach the wall by virtue of superior numbers, and never expected our weapon accuracy and the strength of our defenses to far exceed his estimates. In just a few minutes, 7 or 8 of his side had fallen, and their morale visibly plummeted. Concentrate all firepower and assault the north and south walls. Don't spread out. Karen shouted a new order, and the troops that had been split into 3 routes quickly closed ranks, everyone converging on the north and south sections of the wall. Large numbers of ladders and crowbars were carried over, intending to focus their strength to tear open a breach in the defenses. Jesse immediately called out, Cole, the pressure on the north side has surged. We've stacked a dozen ladders and a large number of people are rushing up at once. I willed it and instantly converted 30 stun bombs and 1,000 rifle rounds, stacking them in the inner corridor along the wall. Then hoisted a whole bag of stun bombs and hurried toward the northern embrasure. By the time I reached the spot, 3 goons had already clambered over the top of the wall and were preparing to leap into the courtyard. Jesse was fighting alone, surrounded by 4 or 5 men, his bulletproof vest scored with scratches and his energy nearly spent. I pulled the safeties off the stun bombs, tossed them through the embrasure toward the crowd below the wall. A blinding flash and ear-splitting roar erupted, and the masses outside the wall were instantly blinded and deafened, thrown into chaos. Pushing and trampling each other, the originally orderly assault formation collapsed. Jesse seized the gap, quickly took out the few enemies who had gotten over the wall, and held the northern defense. Layla here also quickly dealt with 2 gunmen who were changing cover. Of the 5 shotguns, only 2 were still usable, and the enemy's long-range firepower was almost completely neutralized. Karen watched the disordered, scattering force and knew there was no longer any chance of breaching the base today. Yet she still refused to give up entirely. Gritting her teeth and ordering everyone to cover each other in turns while retreating, taking the wounded with them to avoid leaving too many casualties behind, Logan shouted curses at the wall in frustration, vowing they would muster more men soon and return. But his subordinates all wore fearful looks. No one wanted to keep dying. They dragged the wounded and slowly fell back. The 3 of us stood on the wall parapet, quietly watching the enemy troops disappear into the distant ruins. The entire battlefield was left strewn with discarded ladders, steel pipes, and scattered bloodstains. Layla climbed down the wall, quickly checked Jesse's abrasions, took out sterile gauze and anti-inflammatory solution exchanged through the system, and carefully bandaged him. And while treating the wound, she began to analyze the situation. Chiron has lost a large number of men. Their long-range firearms are almost completely wiped out. They won't launch a large-scale attack in the short term. But that man is very deplotted, will secretly arrange things and look for opportunities to ambush. We can't let our guard down. Jesse leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, his hands gripping the rifle, slightly aching. The Morath-Antwaur desperate defense had consumed a great deal of strength, but it also gave him a clear read on the Allied forces' tactical weaknesses. They're just a bunch of refugees hastily thrown together. With no systematic tactics, once casualties mount, their morale will collapse. As long as we hold the wall, no matter how many attackers, it will be hard for them to break through the defenses. I looked at the system panel showing the ever-replenishing stockpile: food, ammunition, building materials, all without consumption limits, and felt confident. Purely passive defense can only delay the crisis. As long as Chiron and Logan remain, the base will always harbor hidden dangers. And the countless survivors depending on us for shelter cannot live in peace. Rest for a day. Inventory our weapons and supplies. Tomorrow we go on the offensive, strike straight at the shopping mall stronghold Chiron occupies and eradicate the greatest threat in this area once and for all. I set the plan in a low voice. The evening breeze swept across the wall, carrying a faint metallic scent of blood. A decisive counterattack I had been plotting was already underway. All night long, no one at the base let down their guard. Jesse arranged rotating shifts to man the lookout towers on the wall, changing guards every half hour to prevent Karen from organizing a surprise attack under cover of darkness. Lila inventoried the battlefield wound supplies in the medical area, replenishing used bandages and hemostatics and assembling 3 new combat medical kits to carry on our raids. I stayed alone in the underground armory, using the infinite resources system to mass restock combat supplies, topping up assault rifle ammo to 10,000 rounds, adding 8 demolition charges, 12 silent crossbows, and 20 sets of lightweight ballistic combat suits. Packing all gear into 3 portable tactical backpacks to ensure full resupply for the raid. At dawn the 3 of us met at the base gate, wearing full sets of new armor and with weapons assigned. Jesse carried an assault rifle to provide frontal suppression. Lila slung a medical pack and roamed the flanks with the crossbow, and I was equipped with a sniper rifle and demolition charges to provide long-range suppression and destroy key enemy facilities. After last night's desperate defense, our coordination had become even more tacit. We could read each other's combat intentions with few words. Before we left, I instructed the few weak survivors left at the base to keep the gates closed tight and not to approach the walls no matter what sounds came from outside, and to wait until we returned to open the entrances. With that done, we moved along concealed alleys among the ruins, avoiding open ground to prevent being spotted early by Karen's outlying sentries. After about 40 minutes, the ruined outline of a 4-story shopping mall appeared in the distance. This was where Karen had long operated her main base. The perimeter was piled with junked cars and makeshift barriers of rebar and concrete, with lookouts armed with steel pipes standing on the wall tops, and a patrol guard every 10 meters. The security density far exceeded any raider stronghold we'd encountered before. Jesse crouched low behind a broken wall and quietly reported the intelligence he'd observed. The east back gate has the fewest guards, only 2. The mall's basement level is where they stockpile supplies. Karen spends most of her time in the 3rd-floor office, while Logan is stationed with the remaining thugs in the 2nd-floor hall. All the wounded are concentrated in the vacant shops on the 1st floor. Layla scanned the interior of the camp carefully through her binoculars. Her expression suddenly went cold, and her fingers tightened around the crossbow. I see Karen standing by the 3rd-floor window, and he's holding a dozen or so unarmed survivors there. Those people were likely kidnapped earlier and forced to work. If we start shooting, Karen will probably use hostages to force us to withdraw. I looked in the direction she pointed and indeed saw a group of ragged, ordinary people huddled behind the glass. which only increased the killing intent in my chest. Karen gathered refugees under the pretense of offering shelter but actually grew his power by exploiting and pillaging ordinary people. Leaving him alive will only breed more disaster. We quickly finalized an assault plan. I would circle to the western high ground and use a sniper rifle to eliminate all outer sentries and cut off the camp's external warnings. Jesse would sneak in through the east back gate to take control of Logan's second-floor thug squad. Layla would slip into the first-floor hostage area at the right moment to prioritize rescuing the trapped survivors so they couldn't be used as bargaining chips. Throughout the operation, we'd minimize gunfire, first silently take out outer guards with crossbows, then use firearms to suppress once the situation inside was chaotic. I took a detour alone to the top floor of a collapsed office building, set up my sniper rifle, and aimed at the sentries patrolling the perimeter. The crossbow bolts flew true. In just 10 minutes, all 12 perimeter guards fell silently to the ground. Not a sound was heard. The barrier's perimeter had completely lost its watchdogs. On receiving my signal, Jesse slipped along the wall and entered through the east back door. The 2 gate enforcers didn't have time to react before he quickly subdued them with a knife. In the second-floor hall, Logan sat drinking beside a pile of looted junk, cursing the humiliation of yesterday's defeat. A dozen of his men slumped drowsily on the floor, utterly unaware that danger was closing in. Jesse suddenly burst out from the side door of the hall, his assault rifle barking as he fired at the ceiling, instantly stunning everyone. Nobody move. Hands on your heads. Squat down on the floor. Logan snatched up a nearby fire axe and tried to fight back. Jesse had anticipated the move and fired a shot at the ground by his feet. Flying rubble lacerated Logan's calf, the pain sending him crashing to his knees. His former arrogance gone. The remaining thugs, seeing our superior equipment, dared not resist and obediently squatted on the floor, hands bound. On the other side, Layla successfully made her way into the ground floor hostage-holding area. She quickly pried open the locks with her tools, and a dozen or so trapped survivors were freed. These people had long suffered beatings and hunger. Seeing Layla, but with a gentle demeanor, they could not help but burst into tears and clustered behind her seeking shelter. In the third-floor office, Karen heard the commotion downstairs and immediately sensed something was wrong. She hurriedly tried to flee through the office back door, but I had already gone around to the roof to intercept her. I leaped onto the third-floor windowsill, the muzzle of my sniper rifle steadily trained on her chest, snuffing out any thought of escape. You think by preying on the weak and banding together with desperados you can monopolize the wasteland's survival resources? I stepped forward slowly, my gaze coldly fixed on her. Karen still tried to manipulate me with words, even using the rescued survivors as leverage. Let me go and I'll leave all the scavenged supplies to you. I won't touch these hostages, and we'll never interfere with each other again. Why do you have to wipe us out? I couldn't be bothered to listen to his hypocritical words. Layla led the rescued survivors up to the third floor. A young girl in the crowd ran forward, trembling as she pointed at Kellen, crying that Kellen had deceived and abducted her entire family, and that her loved ones had been brutally killed at the camp. The long-suppressed hatred in Layla's eyes finally erupted. This was the enemy she'd been for a long time, the one she wanted revenge on. Seeing that pleading was useless, Kellen suddenly groped under the table for the shotgun he had hidden, trying to fight back desperately. Layla was faster. A crossbow bolt pierced accurately through the wrist holding the gun, and the shotgun clattered heavily to the floor. I stepped forward and subdued Kellen, then dragged him and the captured Logan to the central plaza of the mall. All the remaining henchmen stood around, too frightened to make a sound. I publicly listed the crimes the two had committed: looting innocent survivors, abducting hostages to exploit labor, repeatedly rallying forces to attack our safe base, every offense stained with blood. Logan, at the end of the road, still ranted about revenge and was directly restrained and watched by Jesse. Kellen, having lost all support, slumped to the ground and fell silent. I ordered all the pro-quality goods looted into the mall warehouse to be cleared out and distributed to the rescued survivors, and detonated the explosive charges planted earlier at the abandoned barricades to completely destroy the plundering stronghold Kellen had run for so long. With both local crime bosses captured, the long-standing threat hanging over the survivors' hearts was today utterly eradicated. The setting sun streamed through the shopping center's shattered windows and fell on the open ground. The survivors we rescued came up to thank us, their eyes full of gratitude. I looked at Jesse by my side and at Layla, whose vengeance was complete and whose eyes had cleared of shadows. I knew that after this battle there was no brutal force left in the West District that could stand against us. We were only one final step away from controlling the entire wasteland, gathering the remaining scattered survivors. After destroying Karen's shopping center stronghold, we brought the rescued survivors and the reformed drifters who were willing to join us back along the ruined road toward the community base. Along the way, ordinary people could be seen hiding in broken walls and rubble, trying to survive. From a distance they saw our orderly group, everyone carrying ample food and clean drinking water, and that we didn't, like other raiders, bully passers-by. They dropped their guard and cautiously fell in behind us, only hoping to get a bite to eat. Layla walked mid-formation, continually comforting the frightened ordinary survivors. She took out system-exchanged biscuits and water to distribute to those who had followed us. After her revenge, the pent-up sorrow and anger in her heart had completely dissipated, and she treated the vulnerable with increasing gentleness and patience. Jesse led 10 selected, willing to submit young adults to keep watch along the route, confiscating all the deadly weapons from them and storing everything in the armory. He also gave a brief lecture on the base rules. No plundering, no harming others, obey unified dispatch. As long as they behaved, they would permanently receive food, shelter, and medical care. By the time we returned to the base, the team that had once numbered only 3 had grown to over 200 survivors, men and women, young and old. Some had suffered under raiders, some had struggled alone in the ruins for months. Everyone's face showed an extreme longing for a stable life. The heavy steel gates slowly opened, revealing a neat, clean lawn, well-maintained residential buildings, and taps with flowing water. Many people's eyes filled with tears on the spot. After so long of the apocalypse, they had never seen such a safe and prosperous haven. I preemptively activated the system and exchanged enough supplies at once to sustain 300 people long-term. Hundreds of thousands of compressed food rations, over 10,000 barrels of purified water, various canned meats, warm bedding, and daily clothing neatly piled in the huge underground storage warehouse. Dozens of additional hospital beds were added to the medical area. Commonly used medicines and surgical consumables were replenished in full. Defensive positions along the perimeter walls were equipped with more firearms and ammunition, and the base could fully support the sudden surge in population. Settlement work continued for 2 full days. Lyra led the formation of a medical team, selecting several survivors with basic medical knowledge to help treat the wounded. Jesse was responsible for screening able-bodied adults to form an official guard, conducting basic tactical training daily and assigning fixed patrol zones to prevent hostile forces from infiltrating. I divided the base into 5 major sections: living area, farming area, armory, medical area, and storage area, and established clear rules for survival. Everyone had their duties. Some tended the high-quality vegetables obtained through system exchanges, some maintained the wall fortifications, and some handled material distribution. Inside the base there was no longer any fighting, grabbing, or plundering. News spread rapidly through the wasteland ruins, and small survivor groups within dozens of kilometers came flocking. Some minor faction leaders, having seen Karen and Logan's crushing defeats, voluntarily brought all their people and supplies to pledge allegiance, simply hoping to live safely under my protection. Others were lone long-term survivors who, upon hearing that the base supplied unlimited food and medicine, walked tens of kilometers across dangerous ruins to join us. In just 1 week, the base's permanent population exceeded 1,200, and almost all scattered survivors from the entire western district had gathered here. I did not execute the 2 former dominant raiders of this land, Logan and Karen. Instead, I assigned them to the most grueling physical labor around the base, repairing damaged walls and clearing ruined debris so they would, day after day, experience the hunger and oppression the weak once endured. This served as a warning to everyone that the fate of those who bully the weak and plunder their own kind would never be a good one. That evening, over 1,000 survivors gathered on the central lawn of the base. The setting sun bathed the entire courtyard, and everyone spontaneously formed a complete circle, their gazes fixed in unison on me standing on the high platform. Jesse and Lyra stood at my sides, the guard squad neatly in formation, rifles in hand, standing solemnly. The atmosphere was formal and grave. The eldest of the group slowly ascended the platform, holding a makeshift badge polished from discarded metal, his voice booming across the crowd. "Cole, it was you who carved a path through death's brink, providing endless supplies and sheltering us all, crushing the villains who preyed on survivors, and bringing order and stability to these wastes. We all willingly submit. From this day forward, the lifeblood of survival for the entire western sector belongs to you. You are our sole ruler." As his words fell, over 1,000 people bowed together, heads lowered, shouting my name loudly, their voices shaking the abandoned neighborhood and echoing among the distant ruined hills. I raised my hand to signal everyone to rise, my eyes sweeping over faces worn by suffering yet now filled with hope, my heart full of countless thoughts. In the early days of the apocalypse, I was just a dying repairman waiting for death. When the awakening system first appeared, I only wanted to protect myself and survive. But as I traveled this road, I saw too much human darkness and witnessed countless weak people struggling in vain. With infinite resources in my hands, I could have secluded myself in the base and enjoyed wealth alone, but I ultimately chose to shoulder the responsibility of sheltering everyone, to crush the brutal plundering forces, and to establish the first haven of fairness and peace on the wasteland. A pale blue system panel floated before my eyes, and new golden prompt text popped up at the top of the interface. All survivors in the host's unified sector have established a stable survival order and completed the ultimate objective. The identity of Wasteland Overlord has been officially certified. Resource exchange permissions are permanently fully open, with no restrictions. I looked out past the walls at the boundless barren wasteland. Across the region there was no longer endless fighting and plundering. The weak no longer had to run and scramble for survival. Everyone relied on my infinite resources to live securely. Jesse led the guard squad to hold the defensive line. Layla tended to everyone's health. And thousands of survivors carried out their duties. A brand new order was taking root and sprouting across the scarred North American wastes. What had once been an apocalypse of fear and survival of the fittest now revolved around me, forming a complete survival system. Inexhaustible food, an unending supply of weapons and medicine, and impregnable secure bases all were under my control. The life and death, the survival resources of the entire Western Zone, were firmly in my hands. I was no longer Cole Sawyer, the ordinary man who once struggled at death's door. I was the sole ruler of this wasteland. All survivors willingly submitted to me, and under my protection they welcomed a peace and hope they had never known during the apocalypse. The evening breeze swept across the lawn, carrying the crowd's calm murmurs. My era of the wasteland thus came to a complete close, and a brand new age of security officially began. Wait, don't click away. There's an extra chapter. Dusk flowed over the base's 3-meter concrete wall, the metal spikes taking on a soft, orangered afterglow. I stood alone on the highest observation terrace of the community center. Beneath my feet stretched the countless lights of the abandoned city. Thousands of survivors moving peacefully in the courtyards, children chasing and playing, adults tending fields and repairing works in an orderly fashion. From the medical area came gentle conversations. There were no longer the wails and battles that had been heard everywhere in the early days of the apocalypse. Soft footsteps came from behind. Layla draped a thick windproof coat over my shoulders. The icy edge she had worn during her revenge had long since faded. Now she was the head of the entire base's medical system, a faint scent of disinfectant still clinging to her wrists. Everyone has been settled. The outer patrols have rotated shifts, and a small group of long-distance survivors just arrived on foot to join us. Jesse has arranged the guard to receive them. The supply warehouse stock remains ample. System exchanged grain and purified water are fully sufficient for everyone for years. I gave a slight nod and looked toward the ruined shopping mall where Karen once holed up. It has now been converted into the logistics hub for the whole area. There is no plunder or oppression there, only fair distribution of supplies. Not far off in the labor area, Logan and Karen were still hauling construction materials to repair the outer wall. Their skin was coarse and darkened, and the domineering malice of old was gone. Day after day they atoned for past crimes with hard labor. This was the only livelihood I offered them, and the most direct warning to anyone harboring ill intent. Jesse soon climbed the terrace, holding a handwritten roster of the base's population, his tone steady and respectful. Cole, the base currently houses 370 permanent residents, with 3 affiliated small settlements, bringing total capacity to nearly 2,000 survivors. The guard force has been expanded to 120, all equipped with standard firearms and ballistic armor. All dangerous routes across the entire western sector now have sentry posts. No raiders dare set foot in this territory anymore. I took the report and skimmed it casually, my fingertips lightly touching the pale blue system panel floating in my view. The Infinite Resources Exchange interface remained fully open. Food, weapons, medicine, building materials, seeds, billions upon billions of supplies I could draw at will. The lifelines for survival across the wasteland were held whole and complete in the palm of my hand. Thinking back to the beginning of the apocalypse, I was just a dying repairman collapsed among the rubble, waiting for marauders to finish me off, with only one humble thought in my heart: to survive. When the system awoke, I only wanted to rely on infinite supplies to protect myself and save Jesse and Lyra. I simply didn't want to face the boundless darkness alone anymore. But human greed closed in step by step. Logan's pillaging, Karen's scheming, time and again they forced me to take up arms, build walls, stockpile armaments, and proactively wipe out evil forces. I never intended to be a king, but when countless weak people knelt before me, holding crude metal badges and begging me to shelter them all, I finally understood that holding infinite resources was never for enjoying comfort alone, but to shoulder the peace of an entire territory. Lyra stood at my side and spoke softly, relief hidden in her eyes. I never imagined a day would come when we wouldn't have to hide and scrape by in the ruins, when we wouldn't have to watch our loved ones die at the hands of raiders. This path to life through the wasteland is one you tore open with your own hands. Everyone knows in their hearts that you are the only one who can keep us safe. Jesse nodded emphatically. Now survivors on the far outskirts are all saying that there's a safe city in the West District that never runs out of supplies. Its city lord, Cole, has endless provisions, protects the good and punishes the wicked. Anyone with a kind heart can settle there. Many scattered factions from afar have sent tokens seeking peace, only asking to trade supplies with us and daring not to offend. A breeze brushed the rooftop, carrying the scent of vegetables from the distant fields, the farmland I had cultivated using quality seeds exchanged through the system. So we no longer had to survive on moldy compressed biscuits. Inside the walls there was no hunger, no slaughter, no hostage extortion. The weak need not wander. The old and children could live in peace. This was a sight I wouldn't have dared dream of when I was near death. I looked down at my palms. These hands once gripped a dagger to fight for survival, carried building materials to raise walls, picked up guns to bloodily battle the Allied forces. Now they preside over the order and vitality of the entire West District. All survivors voluntarily submit, not out of fear of the weapons I hold, but because they believe in the rules I establish. Do not bully the weak. Do not plunder. Every life deserves a chance to live. You don't need to deliberately call me a ruler, I said softly, my gaze sweeping over the bustling base below. I just don't want to see people like I used to be, waiting to die in the ruins. Layla smiled softly. And Jesse put away the report in his hand, quietly staying by my side. The sunset finally sank. The sky stained deep purple, and the base's streetlights came on one after another, forming a sea of gentle light. The floating system panel quietly accompanied me. Infinite resources flowing continuously, sturdy barriers blocking the dangers of the wasteland, loyal companions by my side, and thousands of survivors living and working in peace on the ravaged North American wasteland. I stand at the pinnacle of power that belongs solely to me. No endless conquests, no hollow ambitions, only a secure home I have guarded with my own hands, never to collapse again. Under the throne of the wasteland, there are no more homeless and displaced people, and that's a wrap. Folks, if this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.